In the early 2000s, there were a few companies with such a phenomenal track record in the gaming industry as Rockstar Games. Most known for, of course, the Grand Theft Auto series. The controversial cover shooting, carjacking, prostitute whacking bonanza that all our parents were terrified of. And as successful as GTA was, and in some ways still is, there were plenty of other games Rockstar made that did super well too. But one game that always seemed to be forgotten until recent years online was Red Dead Revolver. Rockstar's first foray into the American Wild West. San Andreas was not, however. It was strictly level-based, the most open area being a town acting as a central hub. This also wasn't a traditional western, as it took some strange directions into the supernatural at times, despite its rather simple western revenge tale. It certainly felt experimental, but I had great fun playing through it. Because it was released in 2004, there's a wholesome jank to it which adds another layer of difficulty to Rockstar's usually pretty simplistic cover-based gameplay. And though its story is simplistic, its characters were still full of heart and detail, as has become Rockstar's signature in the single-player titles. But after Red Dead Revolver, there was pretty much radio silence on the western front of Rockstar's resume. And so the Red Dead IP would be assumed pretty much dead by fans for good, not hearing anything about the brand until almost half a decade later. After how much of a meh Red Dead Revolver was, despite what cult fanbase it may have had, would anyone truly care about another Red Dead? I mean, would it make a dent in pop culture like Grand Theft Auto did? I personally played on the remastered version for PS5, technically just for PS4, and it is worth buying if you love the series and the game enough, but that doesn't make it right. If I had another option I would take it, but instead I had to wait for it to go on sale for $5 off the original price, so I barely saved anything in the end. Now the game does work fine, there's no major bugs or visual glitches. It's a big step up from the GTA remasters, but that's only because it's barely a remaster. It's a re-release with a saturation slider and higher frame rate. And that's all it is, just because Rockstar was scared of a GTA repeat, but couldn't put money where their mouth is and hire a team they could trust with a full remaster. Alright, trust me, I want to shit on Rockstar more and have more shit to dump on their tightly pressed suits. But you'll have to wait for the Red Dead 2 series. This is about Red Dead Redemption, and whilst this video isn't without critique, this isn't a hate video either, quite the opposite. For this retrospective, I plan to discuss the story in chronological order, but with possible jumps backwards and forwards here and there, where it is absolutely necessary. Now for side missions and activities, I'll be jumping around quite a lot, for quests I completed at different times. And at moments I think these missions will fit in well to the conversation. Fair warning, in case your brain has been cut in half, I should disclose that this video is almost all spoilers, so be warned if you haven't played a 10-year-old game yet. Enough backstory anyway, enough chit chat, enough bravado, ladies and gentlemen. It's probably time to start the circle jerk for my favourite games ever. Not the typical opening you'd expect for an action-packed western. A slow melodic piano drapes the scenery as an old shanty ferry arrives at the shore of Blackwater. This is a town we won't learn much about till way later in the game anyway. With such a variety of people scurrying off in this crowd, it would be pretty difficult to find anyone who stands out. Here we meet our main character, who does stand out among the rest, and not just because he's rendered in way more detail. He's dressed like a cowboy, like an outlaw. Unlike the tightly pressed suits that follow him around, or more tell John to follow them without question. Agent Ross and Archer Fordham are the biggest antagonists of the game, the main reason why John is on the path he is in the very first place. It's mainly Ross, in all honesty. He's unfair and downright evil from the player's perspective, and though he is certainly not a good man to many people, he would be the good guy. He is the law after all, he stops bad guys. He's meant to represent all that's good. The game gives us a pretty good impression straight off the bat of the kind of guy Agent Ross is as he pushes a newspaper kid out the way instead of just walking around him as if it's not worth his time to do that. His partner, Fordham, is way less of an antagonist to John and more of just Ross's bootlicker, really, and just lets Ross speak to him however he pleases without much correction. This opening cutscene, like any opening in any piece of fiction, is full of world building, but also is full of a lot of prophetic fallacy. Prophetic fallacy meaning someone prophesizing something incorrectly or just vaguely. It's pretty prevalent in a lot of fictional historical stuff. Basically saying something that we know the audience is not true, such as a newspaper kid saying smoking like your nan will make you feel way healthier. But other than that, he also mentions Bill Williamson, an important name that we'll meet a little bit later. Throughout the entire opening, the focal points of the scene never really speak, not John, Ross, or Fordham. They simply communicate with knowing glances or movements. Even this shoulder shrug giving us the feeling that John doesn't like these people, along with his scowl, of course. All the while a classically western but unique tune hums in the background. Woody Jackson and Bill Elm do an incredible job with the game's score. It's pretty versatile, but still keeps that cowboy feeling throughout. For Woody Jackson, this is his only video game credit, and to be honest, probably his only important credit. The same goes for Bill Elm really. They both have very small credits to the name. Every credit other than Red Dead seems very obscure. So it's pretty surprising they were able to create such an iconic and emotionally moving score like Red Dead Redemption's. The train ride acts as more world building, setting the time period pretty well.
That they are finally bringing civilization to this savage land.
I could not agree with you more, my dear. My daddy settled this land, and I know he'll be looking down on us, pleased at how we help the natives.
People are still definitely racist, and these two old crones behind John act as a main representation for how powerful white people were in this period, and how most saw anyone else who wasn't white as beneath them. They disrespect other people's cultures and customs and just degrade them to simple savagery in their own views. It also shows the ignorance and complacency of white people in the time as well. These women really think that the government has helped the Native Americans when in reality they are worse off than they ever were before.
But Father, do you mean unless an innocent receives communion, they're destined to go to...
Just a quick side note, I do find it interesting how the women behind John talk about heaven and the priest and the girl ahead of him talk about hell. John is stuck in between these two worlds. He's killed and done a lot of awful things, but he's also done a lot of good and will do some good. And the life he tried to build, the heaven, is behind him, and now he's marching straight toward hell. This scene also helps this entire world feel more real. I mean, I'm sure we've all been on a train or bus and listened to the most wild conversations happen all around.
I would like to see the sign that says no hammocks.
Final thing I'll say about this scene is that everyone around John is fairly ignorant or oblivious. Prophetic fallacy continues to play its role. There's a priest scoffs at the idea of people ever being able to fly anyway.
People can fly. Didn't you hear? Out in Kansas, a man even got a car to fly.
And the old woman continues to show their complacency not only to the persecution of other races, but other classes.
Apparently, Mr. Johns wants to run for governor, which is why he's so concerned with cleaning up the state.
Nate Johns.
Yes.
His family is nothing but hillbilly trash that came here after the war. I don't want to be judgmental, but this state should not be ruled by such a disgusting family.
And with all this talk of change, all these people coming here with the purpose of cleaning up the state or bringing God, like the priest, allows us to infer that the Wild West is coming to a very quick end at the start of our story. So why are we still out here in this shanty western town with a revolver on our hip?
You must be John Marston.
Sometimes.
I'm Jake. Your friends from Blackwater hired me to guide you.
They ain't my friends, but pleased to meet you, Jake.
I got the horses saddled up and ready out front.
Jake seems like a stand-up guy. I mean, every good man I know grinds on women in a saloon and talks about women with such high level of respect.
I ain't planning on staying very long.
Well, if you're fixing for some female company, you can do a lot worse than Armadillo. Fine as cream gravy they are. Not like Thieves Landing. Dang, those girls ain't even fit for a drinking man to hold up with.
I'm a married man, I'm afraid.
Ain't we all?
What a swell fella. Here we got our first taste of riding, and no, not the fun kind, but it's still pretty fun in its own anyway. It's as simple as tapping X until the stamina bar gets low, lest you want to get bucked off. The mechanics aren't too complicated, and horse riding never really changes or develops, outside of getting more stamina the more time you use a specific horse. It's just the quickest way to get around, and it makes sense for a western. As we head to Fort Mercer in search of an old friend, I always find myself admiring the skybox and lighting in this sequence. It's sunset no matter what during this opening, and a beautiful red sky blankets the dust beneath us in golden rays. To put it simply, it's real pretty. For a game this old, even though it's remastered, technically, the game truly does hold up very well. During this ride to the fort, we can learn more about John, how he has a wife, and how he's looking for someone he once knew. You wouldn't expect a man so mean and rough to be a proudly married man, and it makes us ask again, why is he out here in bumfuck nowhere and not at home with his wife?
Listen, mister. This here is what's left of Fort Mercer. Some gang rode in and took the place over.
So I understand.
This is where we part ways, friend. You have yourself a good time.
And with that cackle, Jake rides off, never to be seen in the game ever again. I do like that he never shows up after this. It gives us a real sense to this opening compared to the rest of the game. Like he's only here to drag John back into his new life, and that's all he needs to do. Bill Williamson, the man the newspaper boy mentioned, is who we are hunting. An old friend of a gang we were once in. A man who we once called brother.
I've come for you! Bill Williamson! Come out here right now!
Go away now, John. Don't make me kill you.
Nobody needs to kill anyone, Bill.
You must think I was born yesterday. You always did think I was an idiot.
That ain't fair, Bill. You were as my brother. I've come to try to save you.
Oh. Do I look like I need saving?
Bill, please. They want to kill us all. I can help you.
Well, you never tried to save me before. You only seemed to save yourself.
Bill, I implore you think about this.
You implore me? You implore me. You always were one for fancy words. Oh. Well, things are different now, John. Now I'm in charge. No more Dutch. And no more you. Implores. I implores you to go back and tell them to send someone just a little bit more impressive next time.
Well?
Oh. Poor John.
Doesn't seem like John and Bill are on good terms. From his first scene, we can tell Bill is out of his mind, cackling and heaving and barking at John from inside his hideout. He clearly has some sort of complex with superiority, announcing loud and proud that now he's the one in charge. This is even represented in him standing tall above John, on top of a pedestal almost, like he sees himself as better in some way. He leads a gang, he rules the state in many ways, and John is just a past coming back to haunt him. But John has no choice but to find his own past either. Now, I'm not sure why Bill left our body out there, instead of just coming outside and making sure we died. Maybe he still felt something for John, or maybe he just didn't plan on killing him yet. But Bill isn't that smart. Either way, we make it out of there alive, saved by some locals. But before we carry on, I think now would be a good time to talk about John whilst he naps, or more the man who brings him to life.
Pack up all our stuff and move into your camp. You know, that way I ain't got to travel to work, and hell, God knows you ain't going far.
Rob Wheatoff is a real-life cowboy. Originally born in Indiana, he tried his hand at acting and moved to Los Angeles. Other than small roles in TV shows and advertisements, Rob had a very difficult acting career. He struggled to get work for a long time, and until Red Dead Redemption came around, and it certainly saved him. He shows a lot of gratitude for that, unlike some other Rockstar stars. It was his first big role, and for 2 years he worked tirelessly with Rockstar to bring it to fruition, earning himself an outstanding character performance reward in the process. But after such a monumental role, Rob decided just to leave acting for a while, mainly because he wanted to start a family and finally marry his own wife. And there's a really good interview online that shows his home life and where he talks about the events that led up to his casting as John Marston. He's also mentioned briefly that he used aspects of his own life to inspire the character, but those inspirations are a lot more prevalent in the game's sequel, so I'll probably talk about it more when I do that. The character of John Marston was never meant to be downright good or bad, because no one really is. He's a man with one foot in both doors, and that was always the intention according to the developers. At heart, he's a family man, and that's what matters most to him. Even when he was a part of his old gang, he considered most of them as family. In this way, John is meant to be a perfect combination of realism and cynicism, and as we progress into the story, it only becomes more clear that that was the developers' intentions too. The story itself took 2 years to write. Written by studio head Dan Houser as well as Michael Unsworth and Christian Cantamessa. Taking inspirations from other westerns like The Wild Bunch, which I recommend you check out if you want to understand the inspiration more. John wakes up somewhere unfamiliar, his wound seemingly wrapped up and starting to heal.
Well, you're alive.
So it would seem.
Conveniently, the woman who saves us walks in just as we awake. Bonnie McFarlane is an interesting character, a rancher who basically had to take over as the head of the ranch due to a bunch of unforeseen circumstances.
I was doing something stupid.
Well, you'll be okay. Once you didn't die, the doctor said you'd be fine. He got the bullets out a couple days ago.
Good.
It cost us $15.
I'm sorry, madam.
She's also incredibly sarcastic, which works well alongside John, considering he has an affinity for sarcasm too.
You may be right, Miss McFarlane. I don't know.
So what were you doing?
Was trying to give Mr. Williamson a chance. For old time's sake.
You know Bill Williamson?
Knew him. Long time ago.
Well, what was he like?
Dumb.
Just like you.
Thank you, miss. See my hat?
I have.
Grabbing our signature hat back, we finally head back to the outdoors. Now, Bonnie's farm is relatively large, with animals and ranchers just wandering around doing their chores. The chores themselves are random, as are the actual NPCs, so there's no cyberpunk day life cycle here. A fun little detail that I want to point out is how John grabs at his wound during gameplay. This animation is never really used anywhere else in the game and persists for a couple more missions till the wound is fully healed. We go ahead and find Bonnie outside of her house where she takes us on a short tour of the ranch. Now there's not much of note here during this mission, other than a general store I suppose. General stores are pretty important in this game, they work basically the same as they do in every other game. Usually selling maps, horses or other useful items. The tour itself is simply more time for Bonnie and John to interact. Now, Rockstar does this a lot. They'll use rides to and from places as downtime for characters to talk. Now, I'll give them some credit. Red Dead 1 and 2 do have interesting conversations that happen during these moments. Things that let us learn more about the world and the characters. Instead of, say, GTA 5's version of this. Okay, that's not super fair. GTA does also have interesting conversations here too, but you see my point. It does get annoying in Red Dead 2, however. There will be a moment much later in this series that will seriously piss me off. A couple minutes of driving and talking, sure, that's fine. But there are some moments where these rides can last for way too long. Sometimes it's constant talking, others it's talking, short pause, and more just fucking yapping. I mean, it's lucky the voice acting is good, I'll say that much. After heading back inside for a short nap, which allows John to use his telepathy to teleport his vest back onto his body, Bonnie wakes us back up.
Mr. Marston,
Miss McFarlane.
remember me telling you about the trouble we've been having with rustlers and other undesirables?
I do?
Will you help me keep watch on the property line this evening?
Sure.
I want to see just who is trespassing on our land.
This is a fine weapon.
Come, let's head out. The country is really beautiful at around this time.
Oh boy, a chance to shoot some real bad guys. I sure can't wait to.
Look, those damn rabbits are at the crops again. Get down and give me a hand, will you?
So we basically just shoot pests, rabbits and coyotes. Now, this is another issue that you don't really notice until a second playthrough of this game. A lot of these opening missions are just busy work, which is typical of Rockstar's games, to be fair. Usually don't notice this on your first playthrough because you're so enthralled with learning about the world. But when you know what is going to happen, it becomes pretty apparent. So just bear with me and bear with the game if you decide to check it out yourself. though I can completely understand why this would be a major turnoff, the same way Death Stranding can be a turnoff, I suppose. Too much downtime can be massively detrimental to someone's personal enjoyment of a video game. And I'll give Rockstar the benefit of the doubt on this one, since this is basically just the shooting tutorial. Not that the shooting is super complicated. Base game, the aim assist literally points at the enemy's head for you. I mean, sometimes you have to fight the aim assist due to how magnetic it can be, but there are settings to adjust how strong this aim assist is. I mean, you can even turn it off completely. Hardcore mode doesn't even allow you to use aim assist, which I played on my first playthrough of the remaster. Overall, the shooting works pretty good. It makes the game seriously pretty easy, quite frankly. The only challenge being the game, like I said, aiming at a target you aren't trying to aim at. So after taking out some pests, we head back into our own personal cabin and sleep once more for the night. Now the game does have an autosave feature, but sleeping at hideouts and homes not only saves the game, it also pushes time forward by about 6 hours, which comes useful for hunting later in the game, since different animals spawn at different times, or for missions which have to be completed at specific times of day. You know, why doesn't Rockstar just speed time ahead when you go to these sorts of missions? I have no fucking idea.
Oh, Mr. Marston, how are you doing today?
I'm well, Miss McFarland. Thank you. How are you?
Well, I'm fine, thank you. So, how are your ribs?
Fine. A little sore, but apart from a couple extra scars, it'll be as nothing happened.
Good. Come in, come in. You know, you never did tell me how you met that Bill Williamson, or what you wanted from him.
No, miss, I did not.
Well, why not, if you don't mind me asking?
I certainly don't mind you asking if you don't mind me not telling. See, it's a complicated and somewhat pathetic tale, and by telling you, not only would I be putting your life in danger, but also threatening the lives of some people that I hold very dear.
Well, I apologize if I seem to be prying.
And I apologize for my reticence. Hope you believe me when I say that it's simply out of respect for you.
Of course, Mr. Marston. I understand that a city dweller such as yourself likes to have some exotic secrets, so us country folk are impressed.
I'm no city man, miss.
Yeah, but I saw you get on the train at Blackwater. You with those gentlemen in bowler hats?
I'm still no city man.
But I'll bet you can't ride, Mr. Marston.
I hate to take money from a lady, miss.
Oh, you won't be. I'll race you right now.
If it makes you happy.
We'll see.
John has every right to be so secretive. After all, his entire life is in the hands of a secret agent. He doesn't know where his wife is, or if he will ever see her again. But I also appreciate that Bonnie doesn't take this at face value. A lot of Western protagonists act mysterious or secretive. It's a pretty common trope in the Westerns, even in the best ones. And Rockstar is pretty famous for satirizing the genres they explore in their games, or just the world and people in general. And Bonnie points out this flaw in our protagonist multiple times throughout the story. He acts secretive and deliberately speaks pretty vaguely, and even though John should be doing that from his point of view, in the Western genre it's certainly an overdone thing. Now, I decided to talk about this during the race mission because the race is boring. Again, Rockstar is telling a really interesting story, but the replay value of this opening simply isn't there. This feels like you're waiting for the actual game to start. And again, another flaw I have with this game ties into how easy the shooting is. Racing, or what few missions have racing, is a cakewalk. You will never lose and probably stay in the first place the entire time. This feels like nothing but filler mission to me, and I'm not a fan of them.
That was fun.
Sure.
You know, you should go pay the marshal a visit in Armadillo sometime. I'm sure he could help you deal with that nice Mr. Williamson.
Yeah, I might just do that, Miss McFarland.
So after a short recuperation and tutorial for John, we finally have a chance to recommence our actual mission to kill Bill Williamson. But not before we talk about the honor and fame system. It's fairly straightforward. Doing honorable acts like helping civilians or taking out bandits will give you more honor. Committing dishonorable acts will, of course, lower your honor, so holding up an innocent or massacring towns. But the thing is, you can just negate the loss of honor completely by wearing a bandana whilst committing the crime. And fame works a little bit differently, but in conjunction with honor. Pretty much everything you do will increase your fame, in and out of mission. But depending on your honor, certain people will recognize you differently the more famous you are. Bandits will recognize and respect you if you have a low honor, and civilians will be wary, and vice versa. It doesn't play a huge role in the actual story, but it does affect the world around that story. Anyway, before we meet the Marshal, I decided to do Bonnie's missions first, since both are available to us at once. Mission structures are fairly linear in Rockstar games, but usually they will give you a set of missions at once that can be completed in any order. And sometimes characters' voice lines will change depending on if you've done another mission before yet. Again, the drive to Armadillo isn't super interesting to talk about, simply just more banter between Bonnie and John.
Something I think about.
A peculiar outlook. I can't really say I understand you.
I can't always say I do either.
Oh, don't be so deliberately enigmatic.
I'm not, miss.
Yes, you are. You are being deliberately obscure as a substitute for having a personality.
However, Bonnie does point out yet again how much of a trope John's whole secrecy thing is. Arriving back at town, we pick up some medicine for our wound from the doctors. These places work pretty much the same as general stores, obviously just selling medicinal items instead. And Armadillo is quite the town to say the least. Whether it's a drunkard stumbling around or a madman trying to stab a prostitute, there are plenty of sights to see in this cute little corner of New Austin. But before we can lay back and relax in this oasis, we have some business to attend to with the Marshal.
Excuse me.
Hey, you got a visitor.
Shut up, you! And what you want?
My name's John Marston. You wanted to speak to me.
I did?
Apparently so.
Why?
I guess because we're both in the business of the law.
You that fella from the train company?
No, I'm from Fort Mercer.
Fort Mercer? You them one of them Williamson boys?
Calm down.
Go on, shoot him, mister. Shoot him.
Come on, what, you getting cute with me, boy?
What's going on here?
I got me one of them Williamson boys.
I got me one of them idiots who give marshals a bad name.
Jonah, put your gun down. You must be the man from Blackwater.
Yes, sir. Listen, that dog ain't too bright, but he seems loyal.
Jonah, get out of here for a minute.
Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson, sir. And you. Oh, I done seen enough of your hide around here, friend.
I think there's some school children down the way you can go and frighten.
Oh, hardy fucking har.
What are you doing here, Mr. Marston? Apart from frightening my deputies.
I'm here to capture or kill Bill Williamson.
Okay.
Can you help me?
He's outside my jurisdiction. He's in the next county. Of course, Bill Williamson and his boys have tended to keep themselves away from my town.
So you're happy to have him out there?
Well, I ain't happy, but I also ain't suicidal. My job is to keep this town safe, not clean up all of these 3 counties. It's hard enough around here.
You know, I hear you speak, and suddenly I'm reminded of how some of the people I respected most in my life had a problem with authority. What's wrong with you?
Well, I'm sure you and your fine friends have enjoyed spending your time running around pursuing noble causes. My cause is to keep this town from turning into a living hell for the folks who live here. Whole world has problems, mister, and I'm here doing what I can.
Why? What's happening?
Right now, I got the railway, the people who pay my salary, trying to get me to turn a blind eye to them burning down settlements up there. I got a bunch of cattle rustlers out near Box Canyon needs shutting down. Not forgetting the gang that keeps murdering homesteaders out in the back country. And I got a bunch of hoods over in the saloon, drunk, threatening to shoot up the whole town. That's all I got today. But it's early yet. Give me a couple more days. There'll be more.
All right, tell you what. Let's go deal with them hoods in the saloon. Then we'll discuss Williamson.
Okay, boy.
You're a persistent little cuss, ain't you?
Only when things matter.
Now, Marshal Davies is an interesting guy. He doesn't seem to have a love or affinity for law. If anything, he seems rather apathetic to a circumstance. And I think this is not only true of law enforcement in general, but especially in the United States. It's fairly well known nowadays that law enforcement don't exactly do their job. Hell, the Marshal even talks about how he's been offered bribes and letting gang members and killers hang out at his saloon. Law enforcement is also well known for being created with the sole purpose of racial divide, and though the Marshal never does this in terms of racial complacency, he does continue to let deplorable things like it happen, in fear of what worse could happen if he decided to fight back. But with John here, his complacency doesn't cut it anymore. His complacency isn't out of ignorance, but kind of intelligence, I guess. He's probably right that the men are better in his saloon than running around in his town. But that's not enforcing law, and John knows this. Marston also mentions his issue with authority, and which tells us that despite leaving the gang life and despite fighting people he once called family, he still firmly believes in what he did back when he was an outlaw. So after a short discourse, John convinces the Marshal to deal with the men in the saloon in exchange for assistance dealing with Bill Williamson. Now, whilst John is technically a government agent and the Marshal knows this, it's pretty clear there is nothing official about this partnership. The law during the West was known to make deals with people who didn't wear the badge, handing out bounties and paying gunslingers, sometimes even other criminals, to capture worse criminals in a particular state, instead of going out and doing their own job as law enforcement themselves, telling us that the police have always been pretty fucking lazy, even when they had a revolver at their hip. So we give chase to the gang member, riding across the desert alongside the Marshal to finally deal with this gang. Eventually arriving at their hideout, we finally get to fight some real enemies, using the classic Rockstar cover-based combat. I was glad we finally got to this point, and taking out enemies who finally fight back. We make short work of these guys before helping the Marshal finally capture the gang's leader.
Not a bad shot, Mr. Marston. Why don't you check in with me next time you're in town?
I don't want to be no policeman, Marshal.
Nor did I, my friend, I can promise you that. I'll see you soon, Mr. Marston.
Come on.
So, I think that'll about do it for this video. It wasn't as big as I wanted to make. Originally I wanted to make a big, like, hour-long analysis, maybe a couple hours, for like the first bit of the game. But my laptop just doesn't have the processing power for that at the minute. Hopefully eventually I'll be able to upgrade and get a decent PC that can edit videos bigger than, you know, like half an hour. So if you want to see something like that a little later in the future, just subscribe. Basically a free investment. I don't know why you wouldn't do it if you like the video. Yeah, check out the social medias on screen and just like stick around for a bit. I promise eventually things will get upgraded if, you know. For now I'm going to stick to doing like smaller videos, maybe about this long. Maybe a bit less, so I can get them out quicker, and also so my computer doesn't keep crashing every 5 minutes. So yeah, if you did enjoy, just subscribe, and fuck you.